Hello there, people of the internet. 30-06. Is 30-06 actually better than 308? This is one of those discussions where we typically have people with very heavy biases towards one cartridge or another. They either really like a 30-06 or really like a 308, and we'll hear arguments on both sides talking about whether or not the 30-06, practically speaking, is actually better than a 308. And I figured I'd go ahead and toss my hat in on this subject. So if I grab both cartridges here, this right here is a 30-06. It's kind of a spicy 30-06, but it's a 30-06 nonetheless. The actual bullet type is beyond the projections of what this video is about. But this is a 30-06, and this right here is a 308. And you'll notice the 30-06 has significantly more case capacity than that of the 308. And so as a result, the 30-06 tends to produce significantly more power than the 308. But the thing is, it kind of really doesn't, for all practical purposes that, like, most people would need a cartridge to be able to do. From what I've been able to determine with my years of playing around in the gun community, by a pretty huge margin, if we're looking at 30 caliber rounds, 308 diameter bullets, whether we're talking about 30-06 or 308, you're looking at a 150 to a 180 grain bullet. For the most part, I really don't see people messing around with any projectiles heavier than that. And if we look at the velocities of 308, it's a 150 grain bullet moving at about 2,800 feet per second versus the 30-06. It's that same 150 grain bullet moving at about 3,000 feet per second. So that's 200 feet per second faster at the muzzle. And I understand that that is faster and that is more energy onto your target, but practically speaking, 200 feet per second, you're really not going to notice all that much of a difference on your target. Like, the things that most people would use a 30-06 or a 308 for, 99.9% of the time, it's probably going to be some sort of hunting practice if it's 30-06, and maybe you have yourself, I don't know, a battle rifle or something in 308, which is another discussion we should have in this video. But that 200 feet per second difference in the distances that most people are shooting at, which is like within 400 yards, you're really not going to notice a difference on your target with that extra 200 feet per second. In the words of Paul Harrell, the late great Paul Harrell, it's not enough of a difference to actually make a difference. And 200 feet per second from a 30 caliber cartridge from two already full power rifle cartridges, it's just not enough if we're talking about a 150 and even potentially up to a 180 grain projectile. It's just not enough of a difference to make a difference. Now, if you start going to larger grain weight projectiles, like 200 grain, maybe even potentially 220 grain, but you don't really see that all that often in 308, that's where you start to see a pretty significant difference in capabilities of cartridge starting to pop up. The 30-06 is significantly better at sending heavier bullets downrange just because it has more case capacity. Since you cannot increase the diameter of the bullet has to be a particular diameter. If you want to increase the weight of a bullet, you have to increase the length of the bullet. So if you have a nice long bullet going deep into the case of a 308, you lose a lot of powder capacity, versus something like a 30-06 where you still have a significant amount of powder capacity left, even with those long bullets, which is why it's so good at firing long bullets, firing long bullets extraordinarily effectively in comparison to a 308. But most of us really aren't using really heavy bullets with our 30 caliber guns. Some of us are. If you are, you're watching this and you're like, I'm doing it, so you're wrong. You're an anomaly. If you're firing 220 grain 30-06, that's not something that you see very often. Most people are firing 150 to 180 grain 30-06. So for the effective performance of what most people need a cartridge to be able to do, the differences between 30-06 and 308 at the distances that most people are shooting at, it's not going to be enough to matter. On top of that, 30-06 tends to be loaded, if we're talking about semi-autos, tends to be loaded in some kind of older style of fighting rifle, if we're talking about fighting rifles specifically. If we're talking about like semi-auto, say hunting rifles, I know Browning makes their BAR Mark III or something like that. There's semi-auto 30-06 rifles that you can find out there, but none of them, if we're talking about the hunting rifles, none of them really step up to what I would consider to be a fighting rifle. If you're looking at a 30-06 fighting rifle, most of the ones that you're going to find in 30-06 are going to be antiquated technology, like, for example, the M1 Grand. For civilian purposes, this right here should be able to handle most of what most people need a rifle to be able to handle, but it's still an antiquated technology in comparison to what we have nowadays. There are modern guns in 30-06, like, say, I think it's the H-Car in 30-06, but you're very, 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 very limited on your modern fighting rifle setups chambered in 30-06 in comparison to 308. There's a lot of modern battle rifles in 308. This is just one example. This right here is a G3 style of rifle. This is a Setme C308. But this is just one example. There's the FAL series, there's the M14, that's kind of starting to get antiquated technology as well, but I think that it still holds a candle in nowadays capabilities. There's the AR-10. Just long story short, there's more battle rifle platforms out there in the event that you want to get yourself one gun for both hunting and defensive purposes, and maybe you need a good, powerful 30 caliber round. You're probably going to find something in 308 more available than something in 30-06. This right here, I get that it has the 20 round magazine in it, but you pull that 20 round mag out, you stick a 5 round mag in, and you can use your iron sights. But most of them, if we're talking about modern day battle rifles, have a Picatinny rail on the top to where you can actually mount a scope on these. So you could run one of these scoped if you want to stick a 5 round mag inside of it and use it for hunting purposes. Your modern firearms capabilities with the 308, it's just going to be more predominant. There's much more in terms of semi-auto rifles out there chambered in 308 in comparison to something like 30-06. And with most of the practical things that most people need a rifle to be able to do, at the distances that most people are shooting at, with the amount of force that most people need a rifle to be able to exert onto a target, there's really not enough of a difference for anything to really matter in comparison to 308 to 30-06. Now, if we start looking into like specialty roles, like I said, if we're looking at things that are beyond the scope of what the common normal person is going to be rocking, that's where you start to see pretty significant differences between 30-06 and 308. I get that the 30-06 is more powerful, but more power doesn't necessarily translate to a better cartridge. And I would say the 308, just because of the numerous practical applications, I use that word practical for a reason, the numerous practical applications of the cartridge, I would honestly call this a better choice than that of 30-06 unless you're running some kind of specialty role. Like if you are doing something specific that requires you to use really, really heavy bullets, or maybe you're shooting out at really, really long ranges, like say, I don't know, 1,000 yards, which the 308 can still absolutely do, but maybe you're going after really large game, and you need a bunch of power to be able to put that game down. And that extra 200 feet per second, combined with a bullet that is designed to hold together and penetrates large game extraordinarily well, from a 30-06, that right there might be your better option, especially in those longer distances. But most people aren't doing that. Most people aren't to the point, most people are not skilled enough for it to matter whether or not they're firing a 308 or a 30-06, and most people aren't going up against game that are large enough for it to matter whether or not you're shooting a 30-06 or a 308 at them. So just in the guise of what most practical applications call for, it doesn't matter whether or not you're running 30-06 or 308s. As a matter of fact, I kind of take that back. It does matter in that guise of practical application if your practical application goes beyond just the realms of hunting purposes, in the event that you find yourself wanting to set up something for practical defense. Maybe, I don't know, home defense, maybe you're in an area where you got large plains, open fields, you got the conditions set up to where somebody might start shooting at you from very far away, then maybe having a battle rifle versus something like an intermediate rifle like a 5.56, maybe that would be the better way to go. And if you're going to go that route, then 308 would probably be the best way to go versus 30-06. Not unless you want to go with the far less numerous capable options of getting yourself a 30-06 fighting rifle, which is significantly more limited in terms of options out there in comparison to 308. I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about this particular subject. Yes, I covered everything, so thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.